Well, hello. Sorry, whenever I do these morning shows, I always look like I just woke up. Anyway, hey, um, just adjusting myself here. All right, so welcome to a brand new episode of Hot Topics. If you are not familiar with this show, let me tell you what this show is about. So, this is the show where we like to have those real talks. We like to have those honest conversations about anything pertaining to things in education, in health, mental health, employment, all those things that we like to talk about at the kitchen table. Well, we like to take all those things and put it out there, all out in the open, all in the name of education and learning. So, with that said, I just also want to throw in we like to have those steamy topics. So, we definitely like to have those real conversations pertaining to certain topics. But anyway, this is Hot Topics, and today is going to be an interesting discussion, and I'm looking forward to having this discussion. So let's talk about the topic of the discussion today. So the topic today is managing unwanted behaviors in children. So this, I think, is going to be interesting, and I am curious to see where this will go. so, managing those unwanted behaviors in children. So, that's the topic for today, and I'm curious to see the direction that we will take this. So, I have a guest with me who's going to help me out with this discussion. She is actually a returning guest, returning to the hot seat. Her name is Dr. Ashley Funk, and she has the coolest name, by the way, Dr. Funk. Um, and I look forward to bringing her on. So let's get right into it. Who is Dr. Ashley Funk? Let me tell you who she is. So, Dr. Ashley Funk is the owner and founder of Paradise Psychology in Fort Worth, Texas. As a licensed psychologist, Dr. Funk specializes in the treatment of anxiety disorders and helping caregivers manage unwanted behaviors displayed by their children. She is also passionate about helping her clients improve their relationships through open, effective communication and healthy boundaries. Dr. Funk enjoys spending her leisure time with her fiance and their two cats, Honey and Luna. Oh, and I'm just gonna throw this in here. I keep forgetting to do this. So you can find Dr. Ashley Funk. Her website is Paradise Psychology. It's a long one. Paradise Psychology PLLC dash DRA Funk dash no dot clientsecure.me. It's a long web address. So you could find her online. You could also call her. She's also on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So I encourage you to reach out to her. And if you like what you hear today, reach out to her, contact her, find her on social media. So I definitely encourage you to reach out to her as well. All right. So now I'm going to bring her to the stage. Hi, Dr. Fung. How you doing today?
I'm good. Happy to be here.
Thank you for coming back.
Yeah.
Glad I didn't scare you away. All right, so today we're going to talk about managing unwanted behaviors in children. So I definitely want to, hear what you have to say about that. So I'm just going to go ahead and let you start.
Yeah. So there are obviously a lot of behaviors that children can display that cause their parents or caregivers to kind of raise an eyebrow or say, oh no, like, what do we do now? And there are a lot of steps that can be taken to manage those behaviors. And each one really needs to be individualized, not just to the family, to the child, but also to the parent and the behavior itself. So a lot of times when people come into my office, they'll say things like, I've already tried everything I could think of. I scoured the internet, I did what all these people told me to do, and nothing's working. And a lot of the time, They tried all the right things, but not necessarily in the right way. So I spend quite a bit of time kind of teaching and tweaking things that are being done so that way they're done in the correct manner and they're followed through and done long enough. And in that way, we see a lot of change.
Hmm. All right. So sorry. Before we continue, did you want to do your disclaimer?
Yeah, absolutely. So, everything that we discussed today, I just need to kind of put out there, even though I am a licensed psychologist, please do not take this as therapy. This is not meant to be a substitute for therapy. Nothing I say is meant to diagnose you, your child, family member, whoever. That is not what this is meant to be. That's my disclaimer.
All right. Well, we gotta. I don't want you to get into trouble, so
Yeah, no.
definitely want to make sure. Let's highlight that point. All right. So unwanted behavior. So let's talk about what those are exactly. So what are let's say the top 5 behaviors that you've come across in your practice.
Yeah, so obviously a big one in young children is temper tantrums. So the kicking, screaming, throwing things, it could be hitting. I hear like even saying things like, I hate you, you're the meanest, just the all out temper tantrum meltdown, throwing self on the floor, like, ah. So temper tantrums are one of the biggest ones. Um, Other one is kind of physical aggression towards peers. So, you have kids that might bite, they might scratch, they might hit and kick. We see that a lot with younger kids, especially those that have not fully developed communication or like good vocabulary, because their inability to effectively communicate how they're feeling, well, they're going to show it and express it through the body. And so doing that obviously means I'm going to hit, I'm going to kick, and I'm going to show you I'm angry because I verbally can't express it to you. So we see a lot of that physical acting out. Another unwanted behavior sometimes is two things we call, they're elimination disorders, but we call them enuresis and encapresis. And I see this in a smaller subset of children, and it can actually be seen even up until teenage years, so adolescence. And this is things like not using the toilet to urinate or defecate. So this could be bedwetting, so like nighttime enuresis. It could even be, being so engaged in an activity like playing video games or, watching YouTube videos that even though they may feel the urge to go to the bathroom, they don't get up and go use the bathroom. They just go in their pants or in a diaper or something like that when they are technically toilet trained. Now, keep in mind, one of the first things we do when somebody comes in the office and says, hey, my kid is wetting themselves, or, they're pooping their pants, go to the physician, go to your pediatrician, rule out any medical causes, because there are certain medications and there are medical issues that can cause these problems. So I don't really treat them until all medical stuff is ruled out. Because, if it's a medical thing, we let the medical doctors handle that. But there are sometimes mental health reasons behind those behaviors. And those are kind of the big ones I see the most.
All right, so let's tackle a lot of those. So I'm curious about the bedwetting. All right, so medical issues ruled out. You discover it's not medical. What do you do?
So there's a lot of different ways to tackle it. One of the biggest things is kind of increasing awareness. So if there is a little bit of a lack of awareness at nighttime, or lack of awareness of that urge, it starts with prompting. So it might be, setting an alarm every 2 hours throughout the night to kind of prompt the child to be like, okay, you got to get up and go to the bathroom. And also kind of ending any fluid intake, so many hours before bedtime. Because, if a kid is drinking like soda or they're drinking a bunch of water and then they're going to the bath and they're going to bed, they're going to have an accident overnight. So it is kind of this like gradual like hierarchy progression where you cut fluid intake, You have them wake up every so often. And then once they have consecutive nights of no toileting accidents or no bedwetting, then you start to lengthen the amount of time between every alarm and getting up and going to the bathroom to see kind of where that threshold is and kind of pushing that limit until they can go the whole night without getting up and going to the bathroom, and they're successful in not bedwetting. And then you can even start to reintroduce small amounts of fluids closer and closer to bedtime. And another mechanism that's used a lot with bedwetting is they actually sell sensors that have like little alarms and like vibrations that you can actually place in the underpants of the child, that the minute it senses any moisture, it actually sets off an alarm, and it may even vibrate, and that alerts the child that they're starting to urinate in the bed, and it wakes them up. And that way they know they need to go to the bathroom right away. So there are actually like mechanisms and like tools, equipment that you can buy. Another thing that I always tell parents to do, even if the child is young, if the child is too young, have them assist. If they're old enough to do it themselves, have them do this. Every time a child has a bedwetting accident, have them be involved in the cleanup. Have them go in, take a quick shower, clean themselves up, have them, help you take the bedding off, launder the bedding, be responsible for that cleanup time.
Interesting. So is it the same as like when we tell younger kids, like, or when we potty train them, for example, we have them go to the bathroom like every 3 hours. So something like that.
Yeah, initially it is. So it is kind of, making sure that they get used to going to the toilet regularly. And, some children just aren't as sensitive to that urge as other children. And, kind of part of my job will be kind of talking to them about what that sense is. So, like teaching them that physical awareness and that sensory awareness of what does it feel like when you have to go to the toilet. And, because some kids, and that's part of some medical stuff as well, is they just don't have that sense of urgency until it's too late. And that is, part of teaching them, like, when you feel this in your body, that's a good indicator you need to make your way to the bathroom and use the toilet. And until they build that self-awareness, making sure they know they need to go regularly on a schedule and finding kind of what their personal schedule needs to be.
Okay. Now, I know there might be, I think there's some mental health issues with that as well when it comes to bedwetting. Can you talk about that?
So I see that a lot when it's not just nighttime. So when you have someone soiling themselves daytime, one of the things we want to look at is a history of trauma. And this isn't always the case. Not everybody that soils during the daytime has a history of trauma, and not everybody that has a history of trauma soils during the daytime. But there is a small subset of individuals who have been through traumatic events that start soiling themselves, especially encopresis, which is defecation or, pooping. So what we see occasionally is a child will come into my office and the parent or caregiver will say, all of a sudden, they were fully toilet trained. We didn't have any issues daytime or nighttime. And all of a sudden they started to soil themselves during the day. And sometimes even accompanied with that, they're not doing personal hygiene. So they're maybe not brushing their teeth anymore. They're not taking baths or showers. They're not, if they're old enough, not putting deodorant on. So they're not becoming the smelly kid and having some social issues around it. And part of that psychologically, especially if there's like a history of sexual trauma, is it is a survival or like, defensive coping mechanism to keep people away. So if I'm the smelly kid and I'm doing things that others may find, repulsive or like not good, it is keeping people at a distance, and it's protecting me because nobody will want to be around me. And now I'm keeping people away from me. And, if you think about it too, going to the restroom is in that same kind of space as is affected if there is sexual trauma. So it is kind of this not just control, but also this defensive mechanism of, if people don't want to be around me, I'm safe. And part of that is not just working through, how do we have this person, practice personal hygiene and no longer soil themselves during the daytime, but also process that trauma and kind of feel comfortable and safe again.
Thank you for putting it like that. That's definitely enlightening the way you described it. All right, so I know I'm jumping around, but all right, so I particularly want to get to the temper tantrums because I work with kids and I see that all the time. So can you talk about the temper tantrums?
Yes. So kids temper tantrum for lots of reasons. Some kids have what we call low frustration tolerance or low distress tolerance. So meaning, if you're doing homework with your child and they're presented with, say, a math problem that they are not understanding, and you explain it to them another way, they are not understanding. You may say, like, they're going from 0 to 60, they have a temper tantrum, meltdown, they don't want to do the homework anymore. They might rip up the paper, throw it, or like take everything and throw it away, run away, scream, holler, just kind of the gamut of things you think of with the temper tantrum. When faced with something that is frustrating or causes emotional distress, some children's thresholds are just inherently lower. And part of what we want to do is raise that tolerance for frustration and emotional distress so that child, when faced with things that they have to learn and doesn't come easily to them maybe, or like they're faced with problems that they can't solve and need help with, they don't go into what we call meltdown mode, that they're able to kind of like manage and cope with that feeling of frustration so that they can accept that help and learn that information. And then you have children who are more manipulative. And, we always think of manipulative as a bad word. Technically, all human beings are manipulative. Because anytime we do something to get somebody else to respond a certain way or get what we want or get our needs met, we're manipulating. It's just, are we manipulating in a socially acceptable way or a socially unacceptable way? And so when a kid throws a temper tantrum, we consider that a socially unacceptable way of manipulating. So these are the kids like in the grocery store that they want the candy bar. Parent says, no, you can't have the candy bar. So they start screaming and hollering, throwing things off the shelf, saying, I hate you. You never get me anything I want, things like that. That is, I'm going to cause a scene. I'm going to scream and holler. I'm going to guilt trip you because I know if I push your buttons enough, what are you going to do? You're going to be embarrassed. You're going to get me that candy bar to make me be quiet. And therefore they get what they want, not in a quote unquote good way, but they still get what they want. So those are kind of the two main, temper tantrum things that I see, or, the third one is I temper tantrum because I don't get what I want, even if the parent sits there and really steadfast, like, no, like you're not getting what you want. So unmet expectation, temper tantrum. So these are kind of the three big set-offs that I see for temper tantrums.
So now the question is, what's the answer? Because I guess in my training, I learned, just let them cry, let them scream, let them holler. And even when I work with kids and, I see, whenever the kid is screaming or crying and the parent just gives in, okay, here, I'm like, no, don't listen, let them cry, let them scream. Like they're going to keep doing it because you're reinforcing the behavior. So I think it's like ignoring or like there's a healthy ignoring. Like, to me, I'm like, listen, go ahead and scream and cry all you want. You're not getting it. So um, that's just my take, but I want to hear what your take is.
Yeah, so exactly right. Do not give in. The worst thing you can do if your child is asking for something, you initially tell them no, they temper tantrum, worst thing you can do is give in. Because yes, you were reinforcing that behavior. So now your child knows, if I scream and holler enough and I throw a tantrum loud enough, I'm going to get what I want. And that is exactly what you just taught your child. And, obviously that's not what we want to teach is, if I throw a big enough fit, I get what I want. What we want to teach is, we can't always get what we want, and that's okay. So, for low frustration tolerance, we kind of work on giving coping skills to the child. So it might be working on things like deep breathing, or like muscle relaxation, or doing what I call self timeout, where the child learns to kind of remove themselves from what is causing that frustration or that emotional distress, to do those coping strategies, to calm down and self-soothe, and then go back and try again. So a lot of that is just a lack of ability to self-soothe in those types of circumstances. So teaching the ability to self-soothe. So these may be the kids that anytime there's emotional distress or things like that, somebody came and was always to the rescue of like, oh, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Like, don't cry, like, it's all right. No, sometimes, yes, it's good to let your child cry it out and get frustrated, because that's how they learn to self-soothe when they're really young. If you always kind of rush and go, oh, let me, what can I do? What can I fix it? Sometimes, when there's a problem, you have to let your child try to figure it out and solve that problem, because that's how they learn those skills. Now, when you have a child who is doing the more manipulative temper tantrum, there's kind of steps involved. So what you do all the time, and the first step that I really have parents focus on, especially for those that seem less responsive to things like maybe timeout or the ignoring, is I tell them to heavily focus on noticing the good. And what I mean by that is, when your child is doing what you expect of them or performing in a way that is positive, point that out immediately. So if they're sitting down and they're working on homework and they're, quiet, or they're putting in a lot of effort and, they're staying calm, cool, and collected, make sure you verbally praise that. Say specifically what you like about what they're doing. And anytime you notice those, like, be consistent, be immediate, be specific, point out the good. So notice your child being good and keep doing that, because you want to notice them being good more than you notice them being bad. And that also helps reinforce for the child, like, I am not a bad kid. I just sometimes have bad behavior. And, following up with that, yes, sometimes, if your child is acting out and they're having temper tantrums, once you're done kind of noticing the good and you keep doing that and you have it down, another thing that you can do is ignore. But there's a caveat to that. Once you ignore, expect what we call the extinction burst. So if your child has gotten like familiar and comfortable with getting his or her way, they're going to up the ante, meaning they're going to scream louder, they're going to last longer, they're going to push your buttons harder, because they're like, why isn't this working? It's always worked before. I always got what I want. So I guess I'm just going to have to try harder. So, keep in mind, a lot of parents come in my office and they say, I tried that. I tried timeout. I tried ignoring. It just made things worse. Yes, it did. But that means you were doing it right. Because when things get worse, that means it's going correctly. Because things are always going to get worse before they get better when it comes to extinguishing an unwanted behavior.
Interesting that you point that out. And some parents or any disciplinarian, it's their They get frustrated easily, but what you're saying is, you know, don't give up, keep up the fight, keep going.
Yep, exactly. And it is kind of just having that endurance. And, if, you're a single parent household, have those supports in place, that person you can call and just say, like, this has been a really rough day, or, it's been a really rough night. Or, if you're a two-parent household, rely on each other, tag team back and forth, be like, I need a break, you need to tap in. Having that, because I know sometimes I've worked with parents too that have bedtime issues, and they're like, I was up till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning because, my child just kept leaving and wouldn't go to sleep. And, I'm like, okay, expect to have like a week or two of those really bad nights. And then all of a sudden they start sleeping a lot better. And it is just kind of, outlasting your child, which I know sounds horrible, but it is kind of that game, if you will, of being able to outlast, being able to, endure that burst of misbehavior that follows implementing, discipline. And there are, appropriate forms of discipline and there are inappropriate forms of discipline that actually do make things worse. And not just in making things worse, like the child's behavior worse, but actually have really harmful long-term effects.
Like what? Can you get into that?
Yeah, so I know, back when I was a kid, it was not unusual for parents to spank their children. Or even when my parents were children, it was not unusual to be like, go out and find a switch, or like go pick a belt, things like that. And, research has now shown us that using, what we consider, capital punishment or physical punishment doesn't work. It's not only ineffective, it actually can have really harmful psychological consequences extending into adulthood. And if you think about it this way, it makes a lot of sense. If little Johnny goes up to Susie and Susie does something that makes little Johnny mad and little Johnny hits Susie and you discipline little Johnny by spanking little Johnny, well, you just discipline little Johnny by spanking him, so more or less hitting him for hitting little Susie. So what message are you really sending? And so, it shows in the research that not only is the association between the misbehavior and the discipline kind of lost in communication, but as the child ages, it has really detrimental mental health effects or psychological effects on the child, even sometimes going into adulthood. Because, this person, this parent or caregiver that's supposed to be, keeping me safe, keeping me nurtured, protecting me, has done this physical discipline. And sometimes it causes this like cognitive dissonance or this like battle or war in your mind of, well, this person, treated me this way, but they were supposed to be my protector. And then you kind of have this like war or battle or tug or war in your mind. And it may not even necessarily be conscious, like with the person, but it's kind of this subconscious, like, I don't understand why I feel this way. And we're seeing that play out as these generations that, we're used to, where like that was the norm, are aging. And we're saying, oh, wow, like this is different. Like, I guess this really didn't work. And so we're really kind of creating that shift away from that type of punishment or discipline.
Hmm. Interesting. Because it's back in my day. I was spanked, I was slapped. But
Yep.
now, you know, unfortunately, there's some people that abuse that, and so that leads to the trauma. Um, but I just wanted to go back on a point where you said if Johnny hits someone, and then Johnny gets hit for it. Are you saying that you're doing to me what I did to somebody else, so I don't understand what why I did was bad?
Yeah, it's a kind of, I guess, in a one way to look at it is it's a bit hypocritical. If you are spanking your child for hitting another child, what really is the message that you're sending there? And that is kind of a lot of the criticism for physical discipline, is your child is not going to understand the difference between that. They don't, a young child doesn't necessarily have the understanding to be like, this is different. It's just, I hit because I was angry and now I'm getting hit. And there really isn't that association. Whereas, like, if you do something like timeout, we have this component of timeout where part of it is like, do you know why you're in timeout? And if the child is unable to answer, like, you tell them specifically, like, you're in timeout because you did this. And so there is this like association and this relation made between like consequence behavior. And so the child is more likely to kind of carry those two things. And it even has like a stronger motivation to not do the behavior again. Because whereas physical discipline creates a more fear-based control, like, I'm going to not, if I stop doing this behavior, really the only reason the child's going to stop doing the behavior is because they're too scared of getting spanked. So it's not an intrinsic motivation, like a moral standing of, I'm not doing this because it's wrong. It's, I'm not doing this because I'm scared and I don't want to get spanked. It's, whereas timeout is more creating the intrinsic motivation of right and wrong, where I know it's wrong to do that behavior, so I'm not going to do it. So we don't see that necessarily association of, I don't do it because I don't want to go to timeout. It's more like, I have this better understanding of, this was wrong and I shouldn't do it.
So are you saying, because I know the question is, okay, so what's the right way to discipline? So are you saying like you recommend timeouts?
I do, up into a certain age. So obviously you're not going to time out an adolescent. If you try to put an adolescent in timeout, they're going to look at you and be like, oh, yo, okay. Up until probably I've seen even age 9, 10 is getting a little old. I've seen, sometimes 7, 8, it gets to be a little bit on the edge. But, up until 5, 6 and younger, definitely timeout is a good way of doing that. There is a right and wrong way to do timeout as well. And, I would explain it, but it'd probably take me like a full 60 minutes to explain all the ways to do it, because it's very detailed. And, one general rule is, if you're at home doing timeout, it is the child's age plus 1 minute. That should be the length of time. If you're in public, child's age plus 1 minute, divide it in half. And, another thing I always tell parents too is have a designated spot for timeout. And don't have it be the bedroom. Because if you think about it this way, if you're sending your kid to their bedroom as a punishment, guess what's going to happen at bedtime? They're not going to want to go to the room, because I only go to my bedroom when I'm in trouble. So why would I go now? So don't use the bedroom. I've had some people, they buy like a placemat, or they paint like a cardboard something or other. And that is the dot, or the spot where they have it. That way they can just roll it up and put it wherever. They have a specific chair that's not very comfy. Don't have breakables in the area, especially if your kid's a thrower. Just have it somewhere where there's not entertainment. They can't see the TV, because, last thing you need is your kids sitting in timeout and watching TV, because then it's not really timeout. So it is, finding that right environment, using the right amount of time, and making sure that you've made it clear, like, this is why you're in timeout, and making it clear that it's about the behavior, not about the child.
Okay, I don't know. Maybe we need another episode on timeout. So what if it's, let's go to the in public, right? You're at a grocery store, and you have the kid is crying. Is what it's how do you control? Like, you don't want to be embarrassed as the parent or the caregiver. Like, what can you? How do you control that? how do you how do you time out someone in public? We'll say that.
So I've had parents do this a few different ways. One way is doing the placemat. They roll it up and they like throw it in their bag or their tote, and they will just unroll it and plop it in the middle of the aisle and stand in the middle of the aisle and do the timeout right in the middle of the aisle. Kids are gonna scream and holler, get upset. It is sometimes, normalizing the fact that yes, sometimes being a parent is hard. And there are going to be people out there in public that are going to stare, they're going to make comments, they're going to judge. They really shouldn't. And I think there is way too much judgment happening of parents and caregivers. We see the child throwing a tantrum in public and the parent seemingly ignoring them and not doing anything, and the kid is hollering and screaming. And I've always I know times I've said this to people I've been with out in public where they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, why doesn't that person control their kid, or like they're just not even doing anything. And I'm like, well, that's exactly right. They're ignoring their child who's throwing a temper tantrum. You're right, they're not doing anything, which is exactly what they should be doing. Or, they're letting their kid cry it out in the middle of the aisle. And I'm like, I'll come back to that aisle later. And I'm like, I don't need to pay that kid any attention because it's just going to feed into it. And, it is having grace for other people and understanding that the role and, job of a parent is not an easy one. And that everybody, is trying to do the best that they can with what they've got. And that what you may think is quote unquote wrong may actually be the best thing they could be doing. And I think that we could all do with a little bit more grace when we see things like that in public.
And just, I mean, that's true. And I will say I'm guilty of being that judgmental onlooker. Um, um, and I think we should have more compassion on parents, and and it's a work in progress for me. I will say that, um, but I think it's we have to be. I mean, we can't cross the line with
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
discipline. Let's make that clear. There
Yep.
is a line, but there's as we correct the kids, we also want to praise them for the good that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a balance. As often as you're saying no, there has to be a time where you have to say yes, or like, oh, as you're saying, no, don't do that, that's bad. You also have to, when you actually see good behaviors, oh, thank you for listening, thank you for, that's a nice thing you did for your friend, or thank you for sharing. It's you got to speak life into these kids.
Yeah. And that's exactly right. I mean, think about it as an adult. Would you like a boss who told you nothing but everything you did wrong? No, you would absolutely detest that job. You would hate it. You'd be like, why does my boss never notice all the good stuff I do? Well, it's the same thing with kids. They want to hear what they're doing well too. And even when you tell them what they're doing wrong, you need to tell them what you expect of them instead. Because you can sit there and say, like, don't do that. Well, then what am I supposed to do instead of what I'm doing? Be specific in what you expect of your children and, show them, because you are a role model for your child as well. You want them to act a certain way, show them. Because if you model it for them, they're going to copy it. And, that's one of the strongest things that I think a lot of times we as adults forget is children learn from the people they see. So if we're showing them something we don't want them to do and they start to do it, well, who's really at fault there?
Interesting. So children children learn from what they see, and I think that's also something we want to keep in mind. We can't, we tell them and we talk at them and we talk at them, but if they see something different, it's like conflicting messages.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. And I think, that is a lot of, I'll say this. I don't think it's wise to hide things from your children. Like, I absolutely think it's good to show children emotion. I sometimes hear parents say, like, I don't allow my children to see me sad, or I don't let them see me angry. Well, why not? Because those emotions exist. And those are normal emotions that all human beings have. So let your child see you happy. Let them see you sad. Let them see you afraid. Let them see you mad. But let them see you have those emotions and manage and cope with them in a healthy way. Because that's what they really need to see, is they need to see and have all of those feelings normalized, and also know, like, oh, there are ways to manage it, cope with it, express it in a healthy, effective way. So, I think a lot of times we don't give kids enough credit, especially now with all the technology. They have access to basically everything at their fingertips. I hear, children under the age of 10 tell me, like, oh, I heard this about Ukraine, and I heard this about, this mass shooting, and, like, even thinking, evolved. And our children are exposed to so much so early that we have to have these discussions. We have to allow them to experience emotions that maybe are uncomfortable for us, because maybe, we have our own biases. We may think, like, oh, they shouldn't have to worry about those things. They shouldn't, that shouldn't be part of childhood. Unfortunately, that's just not reality anymore. I remember I was in, oh gosh, I think I was in fourth or fifth grade when Columbine happened. So I got to go through pretty much all of elementary school, never even thinking about that as a possibility. Unfortunately, that's just not a reality for today's elementary school children. Those are things that they have to think about. They have drills and for, school shootings and conversations with teachers. And I think parents need to also have those conversations with children, because those current events and, things that they're experiencing at school and conversations they're probably having with their friends, things are seeing online, whether, you think they might be or not, are affecting them. And, keep in mind, as we spoke last time I was here about anxiety, is anxiety sometimes, especially in young children, can come out as irritability and temper tantrums. Not often, but it can. And, having these conversations with your children and saying, like, it's okay to be scared. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to feel these emotions, and helping them cope with that and self-soothe and talk it out is going to help kind of, like, smooth out any of those blow-ups you might see.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. And I'll also add, like, kind of piggyback off of that. Like, when you see any of um any of these unwanted behaviors, whether that's temper tantrums or bedwetting, or the other ones, we always want to, like you said, check for any medical issues. That's one. And I would also check, well, and also what you said, check for any mental health issues, anything with trauma. They could even, especially with what's going on in the news with Ukraine and mass shootings, they that could be scary for kids. Um, and I would also add, to check for any learning disabilities as well.
Mhm.
It might also be, the I don't know about the bedwetting, but the temper tantrums can just be, there's a biological reason why they're not processing information, and so they're acting out. So let's, just to kind of add to what you said, let's rule out 1, 2, and 3, before we get to discipline. Um, but yeah, so on that notes, we gotta start to wind things down. Do you have any final words that you'd like to share?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely on point, and I'm glad you said that because yes, if a kid is throwing temper tantrums every time they sit down to do homework, yes, check for learning disabilities. I think that is absolutely on point. Great point. But yeah, final words. I think the biggest takeaway maybe today should be notice your kid being good more than you notice them being bad. You'll be surprised how much that does and how much it creates shifts of change.
Absolutely, absolutely. And attention goes a long way.
Mm-hmm.
So, there, if you're, as you're, attention is one,
Yeah.
but also more positive than negative attention. So
yeah, and all attention is attention, good, bad, or otherwise, it's all attention. So wouldn't you rather give your child good attention?
all right, absolutely. All right, so all right, so we're going to move on to your promo now. All right, you guys. So Dr. Ashley Funk, as I said in the beginning, she is all over the place. You could check her out online. She has a long website address. So Paradise Psychology, PLLC hyphen DRA funk dot clientsecure.me. Excuse me. Woo.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's a placeholder website. I'm getting an easier one in the future, I promise.
All right, so she has a very long website, but don't worry about trying to memorize it. We will put all of this in the description, so definitely check that out. And you could give her a call. Phone number 682-273-8501. So definitely give her a call. And she is also on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So definitely check her out on that social media, you guys. Do you want to say anything else briefly about your business?
Yeah, so I just have a private practice in Fort Worth, Texas, and you can always give me a call. I accept private pay and insurance.
All right, there you go. All right, so she works with children, and so if you're having those those unwanted behaviors with those kids, and you just need help, and you just can't deal, you just can't deal, you just can't. Definitely like hit her up. Again, check her out online, by phone. She's also on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So definitely check her out. And that information is in the description as well, in case you need a place to refer to. All right, Dr. Funk, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Awesome. All right, I will move you backstage now. And it is just you and me, guys. All right, so we have reached the conclusion of our episode. Thank you so much for joining us today. So, whether you are watching this on video or hearing us on audio, wherever you are feeling my aura, whatever platform that is, check out our platform for more episodes. And don't forget to follow and subscribe. Also, while you're at it, please let us know what you thought about this episode by leaving a comment in the comment section or in the comment thread. I would love to hear your feedback. And as a reminder, this web series, not web series, I gotta change it. This podcast. So this podcast is a production of A Step Ahead Tutoring Services. So if you would like to learn more about us, our services, our workshops, if you're looking for a tutor for yourself or for your child, please hit us up. we are sorry. Ooh. I love how I belch on like every episode. Anyway, check us out online. Our website is www.astepAheadtutoringservices.com, and we are all over that social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, WhatsApp. So we're in a lot of different places. So there's a lot of different ways that you can reach us. So if you're looking for a tutor, definitely hit us up. And I also want to share this as well, that if you let us know that you heard about us from Hot Topics, we will give you 15% off 6 hours of tutoring. I am going to repeat that again. We will give you 15% off 6 hours of tutoring if you mention that you heard about us from Hot Topics. So you have no excuse not to seek a tutor, when you know you have that promotion. And finally, I also encourage you to sign up for our email list and our texting list. You will receive exclusive discounts, offers, announcements, anything that is a step ahead tutoring services. So definitely sign up for our email list and our texting list. That information, again, will be in the description. Okay, so now I'm going to share this message before I officially close.
Hey there, have you heard of us? We're a small team of tutors here at A Step Ahead Tutoring Services. We believe that education and information should be accessible to everyone, regardless of income, race, or creed. We're dedicated to making this happen, but we need your help. Please consider making a donation to our company. No amount is too small. Your donation will allow us tutors to remain employed, offer free and low-cost services, put on productions like this web series, and reach out to families nationwide. With your help, we can tackle the academic challenges of our students and the emotional, mental, and behavioral changes that result from these challenges. As a bonus, we can improve our communities in the process. Support us today. Send your donation by Cash App to $ASATS2013, by PayPal or Venmo to @ASATS2013, or by Zelle to success@astepaheadtutoringservices.com. For our Facebook Live viewers, you can also send us a star. Your support means a lot to us. Please note, we're a for-profit company. We're not a charity. Your donation may not be tax deductible. Please consult a tax professional.
All right, awesome. All right, you guys, that's it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us today and joining me. I look forward to seeing you at the next episode. Thank you again. Now I am signing off. Bye.